Now, in this world where it's long dominated by the G7 nation, a new force is actually rising, one that's challenging the status quo and reshaping the global order. We're talking about BRICS here: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. What started as an informal grouping, often dismissed by Western power, has now grown into a formidable alliance that poses a genuine threat to the current world order. In the past, it was once seen as a loose coalition between emerging economies. BRICS today has evolved into a serious contender, attracting the attention of global powers and even prompting other countries to join their ranks, including that of Malaysia. So this is their story, a tale of ambition, conflict, and a determination to rewrite the rules of the game. Last episode, we delved into how the Western powers, especially G7, dominated global influence for decades, shaping world order to their advantage. Now, if you haven't watched the episode yet, I highly recommend you to do so. But today we're going to shift our focus into the rise of BRICS and how this alliance is challenging the long-standing dominance of the Western world. As BRICS gains strength, it's not just about shaping global power dynamics, but forcing countries like those in Southeast Asia, like Malaysia here, to consider our alliance and, in some cases, even joining this BRICS movement. The rise of BRICS is creating a new landscape where nations like ourselves here find ourselves needing to kind of choose sides. Okay, we can't go further in this story without getting to know the players in BRICS. Today, BRICS is not limited to these 5 countries alone, but other nations as well. In total, they represent 36% of the world's GDP and 47% of global population. That's nearly half of the world. Okay, you see, these countries actually did not just rise out of nowhere, For years, they have been engaged with trade in the Western world, and their relationship played a crucial role in their economic and technological development. Let's start by talking about China. Back in the late 20th century, China worked closely with the United States and other Western countries as the world's manufacturer. Well, basically, you need any form of chip manufacturing, just go to China. By 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization. Its economy was already starting to boom, and this opened up a floodgate to China-made goods to dominate the global market. Remember that time? Suddenly you look at everything, it's made in China. In 2001, China's GDP was about 1.3 trillion, but by 2023, this has skyrocketed to 17 trillion. China was smart. They did not just stick to low-cost manufacturing, It began investing heavily in high-tech industries like 5G, artificial intelligence, and advanced technology. For example, by 2018, China had become the world's largest exporter, with exports that are valued over $2.4 trillion. And this time is not just about cheap, made in China stuff. You are talking about high-tech products and services. So needless to say, China's investment in technology was massive. By 2021, they are the home to close to 900 million internet users. That is more than the combined population of US and Europe. Let me give you a perspective of this. In 2021, Huawei, a Chinese tech giant, they held 15% of global smartphone market share. They are just behind Apple and Samsung. When it comes to 5G technology, China is taking the lead. This low-cost manufacturing to a high-tech industry has made China a formidable competitor. Once US was benefiting from China's chip manufacturing boom, now finds itself in the race to actually keep up with China's rapid technological advancement. What started as a partnership in manufacturing has now developed into a high-stake competition for technological dominance. Next, let's talk about Russia. Well, the Russia story is different from that of China, of course, but yet equally complex and impactful, okay? You see, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia transitioned from being a superpower nation to a nation grappling with economic and political instability. Throughout the 1990s, Russia was seen as a sleeping giant, you see, a country with immense potential due to its vast natural resources and enormous landmass and people, military capability, but it still struggled to find its footing in a rapidly changing world. During this period, Russia's relationship with the Western world was marked with cooperation and tension at the same time. Kind of love-hate relationship lah. By the early of 2000s, under President Vladimir Putin, Russia began to leverage its vast energy resources, particularly natural gas. What they did is they start supplying natural gas to Europe. Europe became heavily dependent on Russia's gas since then. About 40% of Europe's natural gas supply comes from Russia. By 2021, Russia exported 135 billion worth of natural gas, with its majority actually going into Europe. Here's where it becomes interesting, right? This Europe's dependency on Russia provided them with a significant geopolitical leverage. As you may remember, when the Ukraine-Russian war happened, one of the major crises that Europe had to deal with was the shortage of natural gas. In terms of the geopolitical standing, Russia's relationship with the West has always been strained, especially post-Cold War era. Ever since they lost the Cold War, Russia was often expected to play by the Western rules, particularly those rules that are set by United Nations. But because Russia is a very strong country, they also hold a permanent seat in the Security Council and also a very important seat in the World Trade Organization. However, Russia being Russia, right? So they tend to make very interesting decisions, such as their intervention in Georgia in 2008 and the annexation of Crimea in 2014 have led to sanctions and diplomatic isolation by the Western country. Now, despite all this, Russia has maintained their influence on the global stage, not just through energy export, but by investing in military technology and forming strategic alliance. Well, when you have such a big military, people are going to be scared of you a little bit, right? At least. In 2021, military budget in Russia was approximately 61.7 billion USD. Okay, aside from all this military power, it is also about their vast land mass, right? Which stretch across 11 time zones. Imagine within one country, you got 11 different time zones. And what's the significance of that? Well, natural resources. While having all these resources give Russia the economic power, it also ties the country's fortune closely to global commodity prices. So this makes their economy rather vulnerable to the fluctuation in price of commodity. So to put it all in short, Russia is a very powerful country, but ever since losing the Cold War, they have been somewhat of a sleeping giant, and they have this love-hate relationship with the Western world. India used to be a colony of the British Empire. During the 2 decades, they are busy supplying raw material to the British Empire, mainly cotton and tea, okay? And there was a lack of development, so when they gained their independence in 1947, the country was basically impoverished and underdeveloped. Post-independence, they also had a very slow growth, but everything changed in 1991 when India liberalized its economy, opening up to the global markets and foreign investments. Since then, the Indian economy has been marked by a booming IT industry. By 2022, India's IT and business process management industry was worth 194 billion US dollars. And not just that, India's pharmaceutical industry is also a cornerstone in their economy. They are a major generic medicine producer in this world. So along the years, India has grown, but despite all that, they still have to navigate through Western imposed rules and framework, particularly in trade and intellectual property rights. For instance, India has faced a lot of pressure from Western pharmaceutical companies and government to tighten their patent laws, and this could impact their generic drug industry. Nonetheless, just like every other nation, India does want to carve out its own significant role in this global economy. They have a young population, growing middle class, and expanding influence. Next, let's talk about Brazil. Brazil's economy is heavily reliant on the export of commodities like sugar and coffee. But the issue with this, right, just like Russia, when you're exporting raw materials, you are very much vulnerable to global commodity prices. This means whenever the Western world sets some sort of an economic policy, it could really affect your country's economic condition. But despite all these challenges, Brazil, capitalizing on its vast land size, became a global agriculture powerhouse. By 2021, Brazil was the world's largest exporter of soybean, beef, and coffee. These trades brought a lot more revenue to the nation and allowed Brazil to assert more influence on the global stage. Last but not least, let's talk about Africa. South Africa was once a British colony, and after gaining independence from the British in 1961, the economy is mainly dominated by rich deposits of minerals like gold, platinum, and diamond. So post-apartheid period, South Africa actually focused a lot more on their mineral wealth for national development. Their mining industry continued continue to drive the economy with mineral exports at close to $30 billion in 2021. So as the country grows into an important global player, they still face pressure from the Western economy policies and trade agreements that often favor the developed nations. So that is a not so quick background of all these BRICS nations. Now all these BRICS nations, especially China, have actually grown increasingly wary of playing by the rules set by the Western powers. This is very much like a teenager becoming an adult, rebelling against their overbearing parent. For decades, these countries have navigated the world where economic and political rules were largely dictated by these Western powers and often comes at the expense of their own sovereignty and development as well. So as these nations began to mature and gain economic strength, they started to push back, seeking to carve out their own authority in this world. Now, China in particular decided that it was time to stop following and start leading. So in 2013, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. It's a bold move that signaled ambition to reshape the global landscape. If you look at BRI, it's not just about building infrastructure, giving out loans. It's actually about exerting geopolitical influence. By constructing infrastructures like roads, railway, ports across more than 60 countries, China is actually creating new trade routes and economic connections by bypassing the traditional Western power structures. This helps China to exert its sovereignty, creating new alliances and securing resources. For example, in Africa, China implemented projects like the 3.6 billion Mombasa-Nairobi standard gauge railway in Kenya. It's more than just financial transaction, They're actually strategic move to increase China's global reach and secure their position as a dominant global power. And this did not just stop at infrastructure. Remember in 2018, the introduction of Petro Yuan? It was another strategic maneuver. It was challenging US dollar's dominance in the global oil market. This encouraged countries like Iran, Venezuela, Saudi, all this to trade their petrol for yuan instead of dollars. All this added together, it really pissed off the American power, okay? Because all this move is not just about economics, but it's about reducing the influence of the Western financial system over the global energy market. And China is succeeding in growing its influence. Remember the peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran? China managed to broker it despite the fact that US has been trying to help out the situation for so many years. All in all, China has positioned itself as a key player in the region, in this global stage as well, challenging US role as a primary peacekeeper and power broker. As China's influence in this world stage has grown, the US is not just gonna sit back and relax. They started pushing back. In a way, they kind of view all this development as a direct challenge to their long-standing dominance. So in response to all this, Chinese tech giants found themselves in the crosshair of Western policies. Because let's not forget, one of the things that China is very good at right now is their technological advancement. Take Huawei for example. In 2018, the US DOJ launched an investigation into Huawei for allegedly violating sanctions against Iran. By 2019, Huawei was placed in a US entity list, effectively barring American companies from selling or exporting technology to Huawei without a special license. This move cut Huawei off vital components like semiconductor from Qualcomm, Intel, and software such as Google, significantly impacting its global operation and market share. I remember at that point, some of my friends who were working in Huawei told me that it's even hard for them to buy a laptop because of all these sanctions. Now, and US justifies all these actions by quoting national security concerns, arguing that Chinese government are actually using these companies for technology espionage. However, I would say that this restriction also serve a strategic purpose to slow down China's rapid advancement in technology such as 5G. Because Huawei, let's not forget, was the global leader in that field. All in all, whether justified or not, this action reflected a broader effort of US trying to maintain its technological edge and prevent China from overtaking the Western world in this global tech race. Is this exclusive to China alone? Well, not really. The US actually pushed back other nations as well. It kinda does this to any nation that stands a chance to challenge their dominance. For example, when there was a discovery of shale oil in US became more energy independent, less depending on Saudi's oil. This brought shift in global oil dynamics. US leveraged its newfound energy prowess to negotiate tougher terms with countries like Saudi Arabia, pressuring to keep the prices of their oil low. This move is often seen as a way to hurt rival economies dependent on oil export, often putting Saudi Arabia in a difficult position, straining their own economy. Moreover, US has also used sanctions as a tool to curb influence of other nations challenging its global leadership. Some of the examples could be found when sanctions were imposed on Russia following the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and recently the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Now, we're not saying it's right for Russia to invade Ukraine, but while the reasons could be valid, the action of US were often with double purpose. While trying to protect Ukraine, they also serve as a tool to weaken Russia economically. All these examples illustrate how US, while addressing legitimate global concern, actually uses its economic and political power to also preserve their position as the world dominant power. But the challenges that BRICS face is not just coming from the Western world. The truth is, BRICS itself is not that united as a group. There are significant problems within this alliance. One of the biggest issues is the tension between China and India. These two countries have long and disputed borders, and occasionally it leads to conflict. There was a war in 1962, and recently there was a deadly standoff in June of 2020. And it's not just the dispute of territories. Actually, there is a deeper political rivalry. China, through its Belt and Road Initiative, has a close tie with Pakistan. And this made India kind of worried because they will be surrounded by Chinese power, right? On the other hand, China also sees India's involvement in Quad as a kind of threat to China's influence. In other words, despite the fact that they shake hands, hug, with each other in all the photos, but actually internally there's some rivalry going on. So if they don't resolve all those things, I also don't know how they're going to move forward. Maybe their perspective is very Asian, which is put ego aside, let's make money first. Anyway, another challenge for BRICS is the way some of these countries are being governed. By now you have noticed this one thing, right? Most of the countries in BRICS are actually quite an authoritarian state. There are a lot of reports of government repression, crackdown on political dissent, and a lack of democracy. For example, in China, there were talks about them suppressing pro-democracy movement. Then there was this whole issue about detaining the Uyghur Muslim in Xinjiang and tightly controlling the internet access and media outlets. Even in Russia, it's been largely criticized for suppressing political rivalries. So these issues kind of raise a very important question about the kind of global order that BRICS nations are trying to promote. While BRICS actually promotes itself as a group that challenges Western dominance, but the way that some of its members govern could lead to the same kind of power imbalance and authoritarianism that they claim to oppose, right? So the concern is whether BRICS can truly create a fairer global order, or it will just replace one form of dominance with another, potentially authoritarian model. All this internal conflict that are happening within the BRICS alliance not only creates a challenge for the group to be united as one, but its ability to influence the global governance. As the world watches BRICS rise, right, the group's ability to overcome this internal problem will be crucial in determining whether it can truly change the global order. Now, despite all these challenges, BRICS has continued to formalize its alliance and they are expanding rapidly. Countries like Turkey, Egypt and Indonesia have shown interest in joining, which could dramatically shift the global balance of power. You see, for decades, US has taken on the role of the world's policeman, maintaining the global order and at the same time serving their own interests. This has included military intervention, economic sanction and diplomatic pressure to enforce their own power in this world. However, as BRICS rise, there is a growing concern about what global governance will look like without this traditional check and balance by the Western power. These BRICS countries today are advocating for a multipolar world where no single nation or group of nations hold disproportionate power. For example, initiatives like New Development Bank and Contingent Reserve Arrangement are steps forward to reduce dependency on Western financial system. However, this shift is not without its risks. Countries like ourselves, Malaysia, actually have strong ties with both US and China. We may find ourselves caught in the crossfire of this new geopolitical struggle. China is Malaysia's largest trading partner and US remain a crucial market for exports and a source of investment. this dual dependency puts Malaysia in a very delicate position. On the positive side, Malaysia could benefit from increased trade and investment opportunities with BRICS countries, particularly China and India. The Belt and Road Initiative has already brought significant infrastructure investment into Malaysia. This could boost economic growth and create jobs. Aligning more closely with BRICS, Malaysia might gain access to alternative sources of financing, reducing its reliance on Western-led institutions such as IMF. This closer alignment also comes with risks as well. If Malaysia leans too heavily towards China and the BRICS bloc, this will strain our relationship with the US and other Western worlds. And it could lead to a potential economic repercussion. For instance, there could be tariffs, reduced access to Western market, or decreased foreign investment from the West. In the worst case scenario, we could even face sanction or other form of economic pressure if we are perceived to align too closely with China or Russia. Navigating this new world order will require Malaysia to perform a very delicate balancing act. On one hand, there's clear economic and political benefit to engage with BRICS. On the other hand, maintaining a strong tie with the US and other Western nations is equally crucial for Malaysia's long-term stability and growth. At the end of the day, the current situation kind of reminds me of this Chinese proverb, 锱钡相争，渔翁得利. It means when the stock and the clam fight, the fishermen benefit. In this case, Malaysia could be the fisherman. But this benefit is not guaranteed to come without risk. Malaysia must tread very carefully to avoid being caught in the middle of this clash that could backfire. So what do you think? Do you think it's a right move for Malaysia to actually join BRICS as a partner, or we should be more careful about it? Tell us in the comments below.